Okay, so this video just is going to review, how do you evaluate, the 6 trig functions on your calculator, and making sure you know how to go through radians and degrees. And one thing you'll notice is that your calculator only has sine, cosine, and tangent. They don't have it doesn't have the other 6 or the other 3 trig functions. So we're going to fill out this section 6.3 here, which says calculator trig. But I just want to again make sure that you know how to access the other functions. So I'm going to go and pull up my not my Remind, but my calculator, and go ahead and go to my home screen. And again, I can see that I've got the sine, cosine, tangent there. And we just have to use our reciprocal identities that the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So if it ever asks me to find cosecant, I would do 1 divided by the sine function. And then if I wanted secant, I would do 1 divided by cosine. And if I wanted to do cotangent, I would have to do 1 divided by tangent. So there's a way, obviously, that our calculator can find those functions. Now, do not use this upper row where it looks like, sine -1, cosine -1, tangent -1. Those are actually the inverse functions. And that's a completely different function than a reciprocal. And it's not, it's a little bit, I think, confusing initially, because sometimes that -1 refers to a reciprocal. And so you might think that. And I would understand where you would be coming from. But that -1 is referring to it as an inverse function, not a trig function. So do not use, or sorry, not the reciprocal. So don't use that. Don't use this thinking that's the 1 over sine. That's the arc sine, or the inverse function, which we'll study later this year. So the other place you want to make sure on your calculator is in the mode. So if you go to the mode, the default is radian, but if you ever do need degrees, you just arrow over and there it is, degrees. So and then that very first one on page 5 where it says sine of 75. So I can say sine of 75 and hit enter, and there it is, 0.9659258.263. Joe, go ahead and give 3 decimals. So I'm just thinking in 3 decimals. That's what we do in the AP exam. And I know this isn't AP, but it doesn't hurt to start even getting in that train of thought. So 0.965, or rounded 0.966. So we could put that for number 1. Now, if I look at problem 2, it says cosine of 10, and 10 doesn't have the degree symbol. So it's referring to 10 as radians. So now when I'm going to go ahead and switch back to radians, and then when I hit cosine of 10, then that's going to give me negative 0.839. Again, that's 10 radians, not 10 degrees. And then I'll look at number 3, back to degrees. So go back to my mode, and I would go to degree, and then I would do tangent. Oh, quit that there. Tangent of -100, and that's degrees. And then I get a value of 5.671. And tangent and cotangent, remember, can be bigger than 1. That's okay. It's sine and cosine have to always be a ratio that is less than 1. Now, I'm going to jump down to number 5 because that's also in degrees. So secant of 338, I'm going to do 1 divided by cosine of 338. And then that will give me secant. So that's 1.079 if I round. And cotangent of 10 pi degrees, like number 7, kind of an awkward looking answer or a problem. But so that'd be 1 divided by tangent. So that'll give me my cotangent function, and then 10, and then just the numeric value of pi. So it's not referring to radians here. There it is. So this is like 31.4 degrees approximately. So then the cotangent of it is 1.637 if I round. And there's 1 more degrees. It's number 9. It's sine squared. But here's what you have to be careful of. And I might even go back to this problem here. When you see sine squared, the notation of that square is a little bit misleading. Right, this notation here. What that means is you're doing sine of 145 degrees figure out what that is, and then you're going to take it times itself, sine of 145 degrees. So you're not squaring the 145, you're looking at the result of sine of 145 and taking it times itself. A better notation would have been sine of 145 degrees as a quantity squared. That's what you're doing. But just the notation in terms of how it's used, in math, you put the square here. And I think part of it is that maybe we just want to not get confused. Are you just squaring that 145 if you forget to put the parentheses? Maybe, I don't know. You're squaring the sine function. So how do you do that on your calculator? You can't insert a square after the sine. You have to actually do sine of 145 and find what that is times itself. So I could either say hit enter and then I can square that number like that, 0.329 if I rounded, or you could use a parenthesis and say sine of 145, close the sines parentheses, so I can't even say that, close what we opened to square it, and then I could square that value as well. So be careful on that, on those squares. Okay, so that's all the degrees as I'm looking through. So I'm going to switch back to my radian mode and finish out this worksheet or this section. So the next one I have to do is cotangent, number 4 of 4.5. So that's 1 divided by tangent of 4.55 radians. That will give us cotangent. So that's 0.164 if I round. Number 6, cosecant of -6. So I'm going to do 1 divided by sine to get cosecant. And I just -6. Remember, a negative is just going in the reverse direction. So a standard direction is counterclockwise. So this is actually clockwise. And so we get a value of 3.579 if you round. The problem number 8 is a secant function. So it's going to be 1 divided by cosine of 500 sevenths. And then it'll give us the secant of that in radian. That was a radian angle. So -1.479. And then the last one, number 10, secant squared of -5. Same idea, that square. I have to first find the secant of -5. So I'm going to do 1 divided by cosine of -5, get that result, and then square it. Square that answer. So 12.428. Okay. And again, I just want to make sure that you were aware of your calculator and how to evaluate our 6 trig functions, and also the notation of that squared, because that comes up quite a bit. Most of what we do in this class will be no calculator, but there are times where we do need to get some approximations, and obviously that's good to know how to use our calculators.